"Sorry, ma'am. This account isn't for people like you." The voice wasn't loud but cold enough to freeze the air in the bank lobby. The woman who had just approached the counter paused slightly. Not because the words surprised her, but because they were all too familiar. She wore a beige linen blouse. No logo. No jewelry. Gray slacks. Low leather shoes. No one in the bank took a second glance. To most of them, she was just another middle-aged woman of color, someone who didn't quite belong in a place this cold, bright, and polished. She placed a matted black card on the counter. Silver lettering etched small across the front Executive Reserve Founder-level access. But Megan, the young receptionist, blonde red lipstick, didn't bother looking closely. She picked the card up like it was something unfamiliar in her hand, then slowly shook her head. "This card doesn't match your information," she said, eyes never leaving the woman. "And this is a high-tire account. This kind usually isn't issued to customers like you." The woman didn't react, didn't argue. She simply tilted her head slightly, eyes resting on the silver logo behind the desk's Summit Financial Trust flagstone branch. She smiled faintly. "I know exactly where I am." Megan snapped back a little louder. "I don't think you do." From the adjacent desk, Curtis, a tall associate in a crisp white shirt, turned. He walked over without asking. One look at the woman's outfit and Megan's face told him everything he needed to know. Curtis took the card from Megan, placed it on the scanner, then pretended to frown. "Looks like a system error. I'll need to hold on to this for further review." "You want to keep a founder-level card?" the woman asked, her tone low but no longer soft. Curtis didn't answer. He slid the card into an internal envelope, sealed it, and placed it into the secure vault behind him. Locked. Megan whispered, "Call Alan. Call the branch manager. This isn't right." Upstairs in the operations room, a junior analyst looked down, puzzled. He had seen this woman before at a community finance symposium 6 months ago. He was certain her name was Avery Jameson. He flipped through internal records. 1 second. 2. And then Founder Trust CEO access Avery L. Jameson status live in branch, unrecognized. He moved to call downstairs. But she had already looked up. Her eyes locked straight into the overhead camera. And she nodded. Just once. As if to say, "Don't interfere. Let them finish what they started." Down in the lobby, Alan, the branch manager, stormed in, clearly annoyed. "What's going on here?" Megan spoke quickly. "Someone's claiming founder access." "But her card's invalid." Curtis retained it and locked it up. Alan turned toward the woman still standing silently. She said nothing, just stood there calm like someone who had seen this scene play out too many times. Alan looked her over. Once. Twice. Then he raised his voice enough for even customers seated across the room to hear, "Ma'am, if you can't prove your identity within the next 5 minutes, I'll have no choice but to call security." The room chilled. No one laughed. An elderly couple glanced at each other, confused. A young black student filling out a withdrawal slip froze mid-sentence. The woman exhaled softly, then pulled a phone from her coat pocket, pressed a key. No ringtone. But upstairs, red status lights on the operations panel lit up in a line. "This is an internal recording," a voice crackled into Curtis's secure earpiece. "The customer at counter is invoking ownership-level verification." Alan frowned. "What did you just do for the first time?" The woman's voice rang out, clear, composed, each word, like a declaration. "I just initiated emergency override. And if there is no formal apology in the next 9 minutes, this branch will be permanently shut down." Alan laughed. Curtis smirked. Megan rolled her eyes. But upstairs, the system had begun logging everything. Every device activated. Security locks. Access logs. Microphone recordings. There would be no more, he said, she said. No one in that room knew that they had less than 10 minutes left before the very building they stood in was removed from the national operating network. Because one woman of color, standing quietly in the middle of a bank she had built with her own 2 hands, had just been refused service. And this time, she wasn't walking away. She was shutting it down. Monday morning, the sky over Flagstone was unusually clear. On the clean stone-paved sidewalk of the Central Commercial District, a woman stepped into the Summit Financial Trust branch with an unhurried, measured pace. Her name was Avery Jameson, 50 years old, slender frame, black hair neatly tied back. She wore a light gray blazer, black trousers, and soft leather shoes. No makeup, no entourage, no signs whatsoever that she ran a financial institution with nearly 100 branches across the United States, and that was entirely by design. No one inside the bank knew that today was an internal compliance visit, a type of unannounced inspection that Avery personally conducted with no prior notice, no disclosure of identity. She wanted to see the truth, not through a camera, not through internal reports, but with her own eyes. Flagstone branch held special meaning for her. After the 2012 crisis, this area had been almost abandoned. The old building left vacant by traditional banks, moss growing up every step of the staircase. Avery had been the first to dare invest here, not just to rebuild a branch, but to rebuild trust. 10 years later, the Flagstone branch looked modern, bright, but the atmosphere inside was something else. It felt cold, apathetic, as if those glass walls weren't to welcome customers, but to shield the staff's silent prejudices that still shaped daily service. The first person Avery encountered was Megan, a young woman with a rehearsed smile, but eyes more scrutinizing than welcoming. From the moment Avery stepped forward, Megan's gaze scanned her from shoes to collar button. She said nothing aloud, but her eyes asked plainly, "What are you doing here?" Behind her stood Curtis. Tall, neatly trimmed hair, white shirt tucked in the image of a man who believed himself to be the rightful face of the modern bank. He was chatting with another colleague, arms crossed, yet his eyes subtly tracked Avery's every step. Upstairs was Alan Dorsey, the branch manager. The kind of man who preached diversity in regional meetings, yet hadn't hired a single person of color at the front desk in over 3 years. He was known for tightly controlling the branch's public image, especially when higher-ups were visiting, unless of course they came in looking like regular customers. And today, Avery had chosen exactly that approach. She walked up to the counter, presented a card, and spoke softly, "I'd like to check my executive account information and submit an internal request form." Megan raised an eyebrow, not because of the request, but because of the card. Executive Reserve Founder-level access. Megan had never seen a card like that in the hands of someone who looked like Avery. "Is this card real?" Her eyes asked the question, though her mouth still smiled. Then, in a gentle tone, she said, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Avery didn't respond. She simply stood there, her gaze seeming to pierce through the glossy veneer wall behind Megan. Curtis stepped forward. He didn't need a reason. Just seeing Megan pause was enough for him to seize the moment. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. Megan responded quickly, "Someone wants access to an executive account, but the details aren't clear." Avery said nothing. No reaction. She simply gave a slight nod, as if letting them continue writing the script they were clearly accustomed to. Curtis asked no further questions. He took the card, slid it into the scanner. Then he spoke a line so familiar, it had become instinct, the system's experiencing an error. "I'll need to hold on to this card for further checks." In that moment, Avery's gaze gently shifted to Megan. "This card can't be fake. It's issued to only one person." Her voice was calm, not raised. Megan tried to keep her stance firm. "Then you won't mind if we call in a supervisor to handle this?" A few customers began to take notice. A middle-aged woman filling out a transfer slip lifted her head. A young man pulled out his phone, pretending to scroll, but his camera had already begun recording. Upstairs in the tech department, an employee, the only one who recognized the name Avery L. Jameson on the internal security system, slowly placed his hand on the control panel. He knew he shouldn't interfere, but he also knew something was going wrong. Cruelly wrong. Avery stood still, like a silent witness inside the very space she had rebuilt from ruins. The very branch meant to serve the community was now turning its back on the very founder who created it. And then she slowly reached into her blazer pocket, pulled out a small device, pressed it lightly. No sound emerged, but upstairs, a red light flashed. The internal system switched to emergency oversight mode. No one inside the branch knew that in this exact moment, every move they made, every word they said, every expression on their face was now being recorded. And in less than 9 minutes, control of the branch will no longer belong to the person standing in the manager's office, but will return to the one standing silently in the middle of the lobby. No name tag. No need for imposed authority, only the truth. "Ma'am, could you please step away from the priority area?" Megan said, gently motioning toward the regular waiting seats. Her voice wasn't loud, but sharp enough to make several people nearby turn around. Curtis from the next desk looked up as if he had just heard what he was waiting for. Avery didn't step back. She simply placed the executive reserve card on the counter. It was a matte black card, silver, edged with no embossed name, only a sunken code and a small mountain peak logo. Anyone in the industry knew this card wasn't for just anyone. It was for the one who built the entire bank. Megan held the card between two fingers like handling a suspicious object. "This card, where did you get it?" Avery didn't answer. She looked the staff member straight in the eye, calm enough to lower the temperature in the room. Megan scoffed. "This type of card can't possibly be yours." Curtis stepped in, uninvited. "I'll handle this," he said quickly, then turned to Avery. "You'll need to provide additional identification. It seems your account file has inconsistencies with the system." "I registered internally," Avery replied, voice low and deliberate. "Founder's Tire account code. It's in the executive database." Curtis cut her off immediately. "We'll need to verify that with operations. In the meantime, we'll be holding on to this card for security reasons." Avery said nothing. She knew this script. She'd seen it, lived it. But this time, she let them play it out. She nodded. "Follow your protocol." Curtis gave a slight nod. Then he slid the card into a white envelope, sealed it, and wrote 3 words in red ink: "Fraud verification." Without asking, he placed it in the back office safe and spun the dial. When the safe clicked shut, that sound echoed in Avery's mind, like the final gavel in a trial. But this time, the verdict wasn't hers. A minute later, Alan, the branch manager, came down from the second floor. Solid build, hair slicked back, navy shirt with the bank logo embroidered. Without looking at anyone else, he walked straight to the reception desk, eyes shifting from Megan to Curtis. "What's the issue?" he asked. Curtis handed over the incident report. "There's a customer trying to access a founder's executive account. Card couldn't be verified. It's been secured. The file shows unusual activity." Alan looked at Avery, then back at Curtis. "Have you called security?" Avery calmly responded. "I already verified my identity through the internal signal. The system has sent the data to headquarters." Alan nodded, vaguely disinterested. "You should leave the priority area. If you don't withdraw now, I'll have to call security support. This is a premier branch." A nearby customer, a woman in her 60s gray hair glasses, looked up in surprise. She glanced at Avery, then at the bank logo, then furrowed her brows. "I've seen her somewhere before," she murmured to her husband sitting next to her. At the same time, a college student wearing AirPods pulled out his phone, quietly recording the scene with a reversed selfie camera. The story began to find its own rhythm. 3 students from the local university there to open a group account immediately went live on TikTok. Title: Bank blocks Black woman with ultra-rare VIP card. Real drama unfolding. Upstairs, an internal monitoring officer, the only one familiar with emergency protocols, noticed something wrong. He pressed the emergency contact button, but the system returned an alert: branch protocol temporarily locked due to founder's signal overlap. Megan kept smiling. Curtis pretended to stay busy. Alan remained confident he was in control. They didn't know the moment they took her card, the servers began recording everything through the executive verification channel triggered by the device Avery had touched just minutes earlier. And then the woman sitting in the far corner, the same one who had recognized Avery, stood up. Excuse me, didn't I read about you in an article about the woman who founded the community bank for families who couldn't qualify for loans last year? You're Avery Jameson, aren't you? The room froze. Curtis gave an awkward laugh. Must be someone with the same name. Avery didn't confirm. She turned to the woman, smiled, and simply said thank you for remembering. The woman immediately turned to Megan. What are you doing? That woman is the CEO of this bank, Alan shot back instantly. She can't be the CEO. CEOs don't go around alone. They don't dress like that. Another customer stood up. I follow her on LinkedIn. The Forbes interview 3 months ago. That's her. Megan turned pale. Curtis swallowed hard. Alan pulled out his phone, planning to call HQ to verify, but it was already too late. A new message had just popped up in the internal coordination system. Founder-level verification complete. Access to Flagstone branch temporarily locked. All further actions will be logged for high-level disciplinary review. No one could say a word, and those who thought they were in charge had just had their access revoked by a signal from the wrist of the woman they tried to stop. Only 6 minutes remained. This branch would no longer operate as usual. Avery still stood upright in the middle of the lobby, not a single unnecessary movement. Every eye had turned to her now, but in her calm stance, there was no sign of hesitation, only an unnatural stillness, as if she were waiting to see what would happen next. Beneath her gray coat, her left hand quietly slid over her sleeve and tapped a small point near her wrist. No one noticed the action, but upstairs, the internal security system suddenly shifted. Status live monitoring, activated by founder device. From the command center at HQ, feeds from the Flagstone branch cameras began to transmit. No blinking lights, no alarm sound, but the entire transaction floor from the reception desk to the customer area was now being live-streamed to every senior control division. Behind the counter, a young employee, Eva, an intern from the local financial university, watched the system screen closely. She saw the name on the customer profile Curtis was handling. 3 lines stood out. Name Avery L. Jameson, position founder, CEO, Summit Financial Trust, access level alpha level. Immediate override active. Eva's heart pounded. Her hands trembled slightly. She turned toward Alan, the branch manager, and said hesitantly, Mr. Alan, I think that customer, she's the founder of the bank. Alan didn't look. What in the system? Eva continued. She has alpha-level clearance. The screen shows executive governance monitoring activated. There's even fingerprint authentication. I think. Alan snatched the verification sheet from her hand and glanced at it, then scoffed. Must be a data error. These types of profiles often get confused with VIP clients. Eva was about to say more, but Curtis cut in, trying to steer things back into familiar territory. We're just following proper procedure. If there's something unusual, we're supposed to hold the card report to upper management and process through security. Avery looked at Curtis. Her gaze was no longer cold. It was calm, as if he had just confessed exactly what she had been waiting to hear. I understand, she said, because I'm the one who wrote that procedure. Curtis went silent. A nearby customer whispered what Avery took a single step toward the counter, then turned toward the security camera mounted on the ceiling. She looked directly into the lens as if speaking to the person on the other side, the one watching the live stream from HQ. I don't need anyone here to remember who I am, she said slowly. But today everyone will remember what's right. Megan swallowed hard. Curtis blinked rapidly, and for the first time that entire morning, Alan said nothing. Right then, a soft ping came from the security screen behind the counter. A system email appeared with a red subject line, Urgent Activate Full Branch Surveillance Protocol for Flagstone. Lock all internal admin accounts. Founder-level authority under verification. Alan rushed over, staring at the screen. His hands trembled as he typed the internal override code, but the system response was clear: access denied. Locked by founder-level override. Avery didn't smile. She didn't need to. She had been through too many moments like this to know true power doesn't come from proving you're right. It comes from letting others expose that they were wrong. Upstairs on the second floor, a technician sent an urgent report to headquarters. The footage from the Flagstone branch was now being watched by over 200 employees through the internal livestream system. Among them were the executive board legal advisors and the independent investigation team. Eva whispered to the colleague next to her, They're locking themselves inside the trap she built to protect good employees. A middle-aged customer approached Avery. If I said you should sue them, is it too late? Avery gently shook her head. I don't need to sue. The woman frowned. Why not? Because I own this building, Avery replied, and the people working here have already chosen their fate. Everything seemed to slow down for a few seconds. The tension stretched silently between heavy breaths. One of the bank staff was secretly live-streaming the scene for a friend, and that friend had just uploaded it to social media. Less than a minute later, the video began to spread. The title Black CEO just got denied at her own bank. Now she's taking it back live. The view count ticked upward. Eva looked at the screen, then turned to Avery. I'm sorry they shouldn't have treated you like that. Avery said nothing. She simply placed her hand gently on the counter. That's when another system-wide notification appeared. Alert: Flagstone operating network now under founder-level control. Transaction activities paused. All data is being backed up and transferred to headquarters. Curtis gasped. What is she doing? Alan took a step back. And Megan, for the first time all day, had nothing left to say. No words could undo what had already been done. 3 minutes remained, and the control of the branch was no longer in their hands. The first sound wasn't a voice. It was a tiny click from the door lock system. That sound rippled through the lobby like a whisper everyone heard, but no one dared name. Megan looked around confused. The monitor at the front desk was blinking. Red letters flashed across the screen. Session terminated, unauthorized access detected. She kept pressing the keyboard, but everything had been disabled. Curtis squinted urgently, trying to log back into the customer system, but there was only one message: access revoked by Alpha Override. Upstairs in the control room, the printers suddenly started running. No one gave the order. No one knew what was happening until the entire internal system of the branch disconnected from the central server. A female voice came through the ceiling, speakers clear and unmistakable. Supreme authority, verified Avery Jameson. Clearance level founder, trust Alpha. Transferring full control to the owner. That moment froze the room. Megan dropped her pen. Alan stepped back like he'd stepped on a live wire. Curtis looked toward Avery not as a man following protocol, but like someone who had just realized he'd failed a major test on the very first question. She's actually the CEO, Curtis stammered, no longer confident, no longer defensive. Avery didn't nod sharply. She simply tilted her head, her gaze cutting into Curtis, then Megan, and finally stopping at Alan, the one who threatened to call security not even 6 minutes ago. I'm the founder, she said. And I warned about things like this. More than once. Alan tried to stand straight, voice trembling. We didn't know. You didn't introduce yourself. Avery slowly walked to the center of the lobby, as if she were back in her own boardroom. That's exactly why I came. Unannounced. Without a name tag. Because I wanted to see how you'd behave when you thought no one was watching. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a phone. One button. The screen lit up with a single message: proceed with closure. She tapped it gently. The full operational control of the Flagstone branch has now entered disconnected mode, the female voice from the system repeated. Please confirm the next step. Avery looked around the entire lobby. There were nearly 20 customers. Many had already stood up, a few were quietly recording, but no one said a word. An elderly woman stepped closer to her, her voice trembling as she asked they were wrong. Do you forgive them? Avery smiled. I'm not here to punish. I'm here to remind them who holds the keys. Then she turned back to the phone.
Shut down the Flagstone branch, she said slowly, word by word.
Effective immediately. From the ceiling, the lights shifted to orange pause mode. The printers, scanners, and even the payment systems all stopped simultaneously. The welcome screen displayed a message. This branch is currently closed for investigation into discriminatory behavior. We apologize for the inconvenience. Executive management will contact you shortly. Alan stood frozen. Megan took a step back behind the counter, hands clasped tightly. Curtis looked over at Eva, the young intern, and quietly said, "I don't think this is real." Eva, who had recognized Avery's name from the beginning, said nothing. But her gaze toward Avery was filled with respect. No one was yelled at. No one was dragged out the door. But no one remained in their former position either. Those who once held power no longer had any. And the one who had once been rejected was now the only one who could decide everything. Avery stood there surrounded by those who had once dismissed her, and by customers watching her every word, every gesture, as if it were a transfer of power, without a stage, without applause. She looked at Megan. Next time when someone hands you a card you've never seen before, don't rush to judge the one holding it. Then she turned to Curtis. Procedure wasn't created to replace kindness. It was made to reinforce it. Finally, she stepped toward Alan, who was still drenched in cold sweat. And you remember this, a CEO doesn't need to be recognized. But those who don't know who they serve should not be leading. Everyone remained silent. Avery left the lobby without haste. As the glass doors slid open behind her, a few customers began to clap, not because she had won, but because finally someone had stood up for what was right in the very place where wrong had been done. And so in just 9 minutes, someone who had been denied service had shut down the very branch she once built from her own dream. No yelling, no formal authority, just the truth and the courage to let it shine. The next day, the sign outside the flagstone branch was still lit, but the doors remained closed. A notice printed on white paper framed neatly and placed right in front of the glass door. This branch is temporarily closed for internal misconduct investigation. We apologize for letting you down. We look forward to welcoming you back with the level of service you truly deserve. Inside, there was no one at the counter. Alan, the branch manager, Megan, the receptionist, and Curtis, the teller, had all been suspended. The decision was effective that very night. All were awaiting formal investigation from the internal compliance team. But it wasn't just about punishment. Eva, the intern who had spoken up amid silence, was invited to headquarters. Not to apologize, but to take on a new role helping to rebuild the employee training program at Summit Financial Trust, with her first mission teach others how to tell the difference between professionalism and unconscious bias. Less than 72 hours after the incident, Avery Jameson held a public press conference, broadcast both on national television and across social media. She didn't stand behind a high wooden podium or a row of aides. She sat on a simple leather chair, hands resting on a folder faintly labeled with the name of the new campaign, Open Access. Before cameras from over 30 major media outlets, she opened with something no one expected: "I'm sorry." No legal jargon, no blaming the system, no deflection. "I'm sorry that one of the branches I founded turned its back on the very people it was created to serve. I'm sorry that the arrogance of process allowed people to be judged by appearance. And I'm sorry it took a public incident to force this change to happen." The room was dead silent. No one was taking notes. Everyone was just looking at her, the woman who had just been denied service by someone under her command, now standing up to take the blame for not seeing the decay from within. She continued, "The financial system I helped build cannot just be about numbers. It has to be a place of trust. And trust cannot exist if bias still lives in how we greet, how we listen, or even in how we look at someone when they walk into the lobby." Avery announced the Open Access Initiative starting the following week. The project included a full audit of all 87 branches nationwide carried out by an independent external investigation team. 100% of front desk and teller staff to be retrained with mandatory participation in unconscious bias ethical response and equitable service programs. A new community feedback board led by former customers who had been denied service, including the elderly, women, people of color, and LGBTQ+ individuals. And then, Avery announced something unprecedented: every customer who has been denied service since 2020 can now submit a report, and we will review each case publicly. The press conference didn't end with applause. It ended with a very deep silence, as if everyone there was reflecting on how they had once been treated in places that were supposed to symbolize trust. After the conference, a CNN reporter asked Avery if you could say one sentence to redefine banking in this era. What would it be? Avery paused for a few seconds, then looked directly into the camera. No script. No preparation. A bank doesn't just hold money. It holds the respect between people, and that should never be locked away. That statement was quoted more than 1.7 million times on social media within 48 hours. Summit Financial Trust's account gained over 300,000 followers. But more importantly, in the polls that followed, 72% of respondents said they felt represented by a financial CEO for the very first time. And there was one more detail not mentioned in the press release. In an internal email sent to all 40+ employees, Avery ended with a single line starting today: if you can't see a customer as a human being, you don't get to see a paycheck. Flagstone branch closed for exactly 30 days. And when it reopened, it wasn't the same. The sign on the door still read Summit Financial Trust, but below that in smaller italic letters was a new line proposed by Eva herself: respect is not a service. It's a requirement. The story began with a dismissive glance, a withheld card, and a threat to call security. But it ended with accountability reform and a new kind of trust, public, clear, and non-negotiable. Because this time, justice didn't come from the courtroom. It came right in the middle of a bank lobby, where a woman once denied service came back to make things right for the entire system.